Hello, I am James Andrews. I'm a reporter with Food Safety News. We're here at IAFP 2015. It's a food safety conference in Portland, Oregon this year, and I'm joined by John Sammon. John's the head of the SureCheck business within ParTech Corporation. And, John, I wanted to talk to you about some of the technological solutions that you guys are coming up with and, how they play a role in the evolving world of food safety. And one thing I wanted to ask you about, first of all, is just what can you tell us about your company's technology and what problems is this technology trying to solve?
Right, that's a great question. So SureCheck is a software solution, and as such, it is in the information age, and it is collecting a tremendous amount of data. And so the problems that arise in food safety, particularly in today's world, in today's landscape, is the fact that you have these organizations that have large enterprises, many employees of different grades and calibers, and employees of different languages, native languages. And so you have a culture that's more and more broad. And in food safety, it's all about behavior. So food safety hasn't really changed in the last few hundred years, meaning the things that humans have consumed for hundreds of years, and the way the food is prepared is widely known and understood. So if you know where foodborne illness comes from, the question really becomes, well, how does it promulgate? And as such, it's human behavior. So our technology is allowing for visibility of human behavior, and it's also enforcing it. So in this context, what we're talking about is using a mobile device that PAR manufactures and designed for employees in the retail space to go throughout their day doing the proper activities that they're supposed to do in order to prepare and store food in a safe and hygienic fashion. So it's a methodology of making the employees do the right things, and also having a verification from afar that they have completed those tasks.
Right. So an employee has a task they need to do, like take a temperature measurement or something.
Right.
And, you want to trust that employee is always going to do that.
Right.
But classically, perhaps you're on a paper-based system.
Correct.
And now this is a different option.
Sure. So you can imagine if it was your role in an organization to make sure that the food that your organization is preparing is safe for consumption for all of your customers. You put in these processes and a HACCP plan that says, okay, employees, please do the following things. And your method of tracking that typically has always been paper and pencil. And so, as such, the perfect employee would go throughout their day. They would temp things. They would clean surfaces. They would use particular solutions and astringents, and then they would write that all down. Now, that's time-consuming for them to do that if they're doing it properly, and also it's all on paper, and we don't have perfect employees, in the world. We do at PAR, by the way, but I mean, in the context of large organizations, it's very difficult to rely on thousands of employees to behave in a way that is in sync with your process. So if it's my responsibility to make sure that the food that my company is preparing is safe, I want to put systems in place that are verifiable, that are actually something that you can make the behavior happen, as well as I can go back and have a digital footprint of what actually happened. And so in that context, this is what the technology was meant to do.
So who's using this? What sorts of contexts are you seeing people start to transition to technology like this?
Right. So there's a number of segments where this technology applies. Where we have been spending most of our time has been in the grocery retail space. So we are with the largest grocer in the world, some 6,000 locations currently and growing. They're taking us into Great Britain and China and India and Mexico and South America, Japan and further on. They're a great champion proponent of this technology. Beyond that, we're also working with Target in their supercenters, and we have a customer, a fantastic customer in the Northeast called Wegmans. And Wegmans is a high-end grocery store. They are what I like to refer as a power user of SureCheck technology. They have typically 10, sometimes 12 devices per store, and they're doing everything from temping their fried foods, their pizzas, their prepared foods. They're making sure that people are cleaning, and they're using technology such that, with this device, you physically have to go to a location in the store and read an RFID tag, and that proves that I, John Sammon, was actually in that part of the store, and then followed the particular task. So they're going even further, and they're incorporating things that are we never would have thought of. Uh-huh. Like, for example, they're using the barcode reader to collect weight. So they take some prepared food and they put it on the scale and they scan it, and they get the weight of that particular product. They put it out, they temp it all day long, and at the end of the day they take it off, put it back on the scale, and they weigh it. And the delta between the weights is of interest to them, and it's of interest to them for many reasons. And so they can do a lot of dynamic things where they know which products are selling at what prices. They know how fast they're being consumed. They know when they're being consumed, when they're so there's a lot of business intelligence that comes from the more data you collect. And I think that's the part that was unforeseen by PAR, which was that we obviously knew there was a value in using the Internet of Things and bringing it to food safety. We didn't realize that the data that we collect would have so many other pieces of value for our customers.
So outside of say a retail or a restaurant environment, I mean,
Yep.
Trying to think about the supply chain, are there ways to use the technology to help, say, verify from a supplier to the endpoint that
Right.
that different things are being adhered to?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of existing technology out there that really can be and should be incorporated into a food safety platform. And so more and more, the large retailers, and of course the federal governments as well, are interested in the food being monitored and tracked all the way from its origin to its destination. So that means that you would want to make sure that temperature is maintained while over the road from production facility to a distribution center, make sure that it's maintained within the distribution center, and then also when they break bulk and they build up those trailers that go actually to the store, maintained along that route. And all of that can be fed into a food safety platform, which basically starts now putting that verification on your distribution and your supply chain and your manufacturers and your suppliers. And you hear a lot about that in these conferences about, food safety is really a community, and it's a trust that comes with suppliers and vendors. And these solutions are verifications of those relationships and the fact that your suppliers and your vendors are doing what they need to be doing, maintaining temperatures, maintaining cleanliness, following the proper procedures, and having visibility to that.
Yeah, and speaking of growing supply chains, I mean, thinking about a globalized world, right, and how complex some of our supply chains are becoming, and adding on top of that new regulations all the time, like the Food Safety Modernization
Right.
Act, things like that. Is this kind of what precipitated the development of this sort of technology?
It did, and if you think about it, it's kind of like at a crucial point. So you're right. The food system is getting more and more complex. Where it comes from and how it gets to our families, and how it gets to our restaurants, and how it gets to our supermarkets. And more, there's food's coming from different continents and it's coming from different sources, and it's changing all the time, and that's not ending. So on top of that, you have the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is putting more stringent laws on the food system and making sure that the people are doing the right things by having 2 years worth of documented HACCP records. So you might think as a retailer you would say, this is like a perfect storm for me. I got more requirements, more regulatory requirements, and yet things are getting more complicated, not simple. Well, good thing we live in the information age. Good thing we live in the age of the Internet of Things, and there's devices like this that actually are coming at a perfect time to really streamline and bring food safety into the information age. Paper and pencil, 2 years of paper and pencil in a very complex, dynamic environment, thousands of employees, it becomes just unthinkable. So, the technology, I think, is the interesting point in that triangle that says, yeah, more regulatory, more complex food, but also we happen to be in the technology age, and so it's a good time for something like this.
Right. Well, I mean, this technology is pretty interesting to me, but and I know that this is your focus right now.
Right.
Do you have anything planned down the road? Are there other sorts of problems you're hoping to tackle in the future?
That's a great question. So we did talk about distribution a little bit and talked about the fact that food travels and the safety and the quality of the food during that process is very important. But, there's also food production, and, of course, there's different areas where food is consumed. There's purchased at groceries, it's purchased at restaurants. Obviously, there's food service and catering and all that. So there's a lot of dynamic places where food needs to be monitored and the proper cultures and processes need to be kept in place. One area that I think was very interesting and that we are pursuing is traceability. And the idea there is, as an example, meat grinding logs where an animal is processed and then they comes to the butcher shop in the back of your supermarket, and then they grind it into ground beef, and then that goes out on the shelf. Using this technology, we scan the barcodes, and we know where the product's coming from, and if it does get out on the shelf and there's a recall, we have a good visibility of where it came from, which lots the beef came from, and what we did with it when we got it, and where it is in the store, and we could track it further from there. But that's a law that's inside of the new FSMA regulatory processes. So traceability, more and more gathering. So this is a device that is filled with sensors. There's RFID, there's barcode scanning, there's Bluetooth, there's infrared, and then there's a temperature probe. And all that sensor technology, if you think about it, it's the way of the future is more and more pieces of information that are being collected and then managed in an intellectual way. And so in our cloud solution, we have millions and millions of pieces of data, and that we only see growing. So it's kind of like the Moore's Law, really, and we're following it. And food safety is no different. Food safety is exactly the same. It's following that exact same pattern. You have more things out there collecting more data, and then obviously we're putting them in place to drive behavior and to drive the right processes. And so that's the future of food safety.
All right, John, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. This has been a really interesting conversation.
Thanks, James. It's been fun.
All right, thank you.